Thanks for tuning in, and welcome to this week's review of Death Proof, starring Kurt Russell.
Buckle up, because a new kind of terror is coming at 200 miles per hour.
Ladies, we're gonna have some fun.
There are few things as fetching as a bruised ego on a beautiful angel.
Is that cowboy wisdom?
I'm not a cowboy, Pam. I'm a stuntman.
I want to start this review by saying that Grindhouse was by far the most in-depth review I've done on any movie. After watching Grindhouse for the first time, it took me a full day to kind of evaluate my thoughts on the two movies and not just one. This is my review of Death Proof only, after the second time I watched the film. This will have spoilers in it. In case you're wondering why I'm not doing a review on Planet Terror alone, it's because I really didn't have any mixed emotions on that movie. My review and view really wouldn't change in any way. So if you haven't seen Grindhouse yet, don't listen any further. Come back after you've seen the movie. Just check out my review on Grindhouse and come back and check this one out later. I mentioned this before, but I'm going to mention it again. When I do a review on a new movie in a theater, I never want to read anything about that movie. I do not want to know anything more than what they give me in the trailer. I never read any forums. I never look at any interviews. If I'm interested in a movie, all I want to see is the trailer itself and know what time to go see the movie. That's it. I don't want to be influenced by anyone else's thoughts or opinions prior to seeing the movie. And this is what I do for every movie. Now, at the movie Grindhouse, I watched the movie and I gave my review, and then I went to see what everyone else was saying on the forums. I must have read about 2,000 posts regarding the movie Grindhouse, and after looking at all the feedback from the fans and critics, I found that without a doubt, Death Proof was either you loved it or you hated it. And I was really torn between the two. I really loved some parts of it, and I wasn't, there's some parts I wasn't very fond of as well. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for anyone that directs a movie. It's not easy. It takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to make them. And, I always want to try and get the best possible review with the respect for the efforts that it takes to produce a good motion picture. So I got to thinking, there are two major issues I have with Death Proof. First was the pacing. I thought there were some major pacing problems with the movie. And second, I was torn with Stuntman Mike's character. I've said it countless times, I'm a huge Kurt Russell fan, and he was the reason why I wanted to see the movie Death Proof, that and the fact that Quentin Tarantino was the director. So this is what I'll be discussing in this follow-up review of the movie Death Proof. Now before I get started with all that, let's start with a little fact-checking. Someone posted on Wikipedia that the Charger used by Stuntman Mike was a 1970 Charger. This is not the case. Unless they switched the front end, the Charger used in the movie is a 69. Here's a graphic with the front ends of the 68, 69, and 70 Charger. You can clearly see that the middle one was the one used in Death Proof. This is the same model as the General Lee used in the Dukes of Hazzard. The Charger is one of my all-time favorite muscle cars. Check out the movie Blade for my personal favorite, the 1968 Charger. And since we're talking about muscle cars, I thought I'd give a quick shout out to my personal favorites. My top 3 muscle cars have to be, and to be totally honest, value aside, I can't pick one of these above the other. They're all works of art. So I'll just list them in the order they were created. We'll start with the 1968 Dodge Charger, followed by the 1969 Boss 429 Mustang, and finally we have the 1971 Plymouth 426 Hemi Cuda. Of these three, the Hemi Cuda is by far most valuable. The 1971 Cuda convertible went for $4.5 million recently. It's not a bad investment considering they're about $5,000 new back in the day. Now back to my review of the movie Death Proof. Dealing with the pacing, I thought about this and made a graph of the pacing of the movie Grindhouse, including the trailers. We start with Machete, a real high point for the whole movie, and then we drop off a little bit when it comes to the beginning of Planet Terror, and the action in the movie builds consistently until we get to the climax of the movie, and finally the movie winds down a bit until it comes to a conclusion. Then we get to the 3 trailers in the middle of the 2 movies. These are again high points in the movie. And then for almost 100 minutes, when we start the movie Death Proof. And Death Proof starts out like a normal movie should, building up the characters, setting the storyline we're about to see. And the real problem isn't the movie's fault, it's just the fact that at this point, most people are instinctively ready to leave their seats and go home or eat or whatever. Now we have to start all over and slow our gears down to start a whole new story. As I said in my original review of Grindhouse, I like the first set of girls better, and there's a reason for this. I found myself paying more attention to the first group than the second one, and by the time the first group plays out and Stuntman Mike kills them all, now we're back to square one, and now we have to get to know the second group of girls just like we got to know the first set. And by this time, I really wasn't that interested in them because I just got to know the first set and now they're all dead. So why bother getting to know this group? Also, the most distracting part about the roundtable discussion with the second group of girls is that you see Stuntman Mike in the background, and you keep waiting for him to enter the scene somehow, in which he never does. And I do consider him the star of the movie. He is the main character, Mike and the cars. Then the girls go to get a test drive of that Challenger, and the pace really doesn't pick up here either. So to sum all this up, We're hitting really thick dialogue in the middle of an action movie that we're 2 hours into, knowing we still have a ways to go. This is like when we sat through 2 hours of love story for Pearl Harbor, and after 2 hours the action finally began. And all I remember thinking at that point was, wow, we just got attacked, and that means I still got to sit here for another 30-40 minutes minimum. That was one of the most botched movies in history. This is the main problem with this movie. This is not a problem with Death Proof, but this is a problem with Grindhouse. If this movie was playing solo or had been the first movie, I don't think the pacing would have been nearly the issue. So after thinking about this for a while, I decided to see Death Proof by itself. I just waited until the movie was about an hour and 20 minutes in, and then walked in like I was just going to see Death Proof as a solo feature. So this time I treated Death Proof as a movie by itself instead of the second in a double feature. Now, I have seen double features before, but it's been a long time since I've seen one, and I'm just not accustomed to it at this point. This just goes to show how much I respect a director like Quentin Tarantino. I wouldn't do this for almost any other director, maybe Kubrick or Scorsese or even James Cameron. He is creative enough for me to consider the fact that I may not have gotten the full idea of what he was doing the first time. And considering that this is my first double feature in a long time, I may need to reevaluate my review on the movie. I was willing to do all of these three things. I was going to watch the movie like it was my first time and be totally willing to either drop my original rating, raise my original rating, or even just keep it the same. So what I found was that in my second viewing, I was paying much more attention to the dialogue, and to be totally honest, the first time I saw the movie, I couldn't remember much from the roundtable discussion. I just kept waiting for Kurt Russell to pop into the frame. And the main reason for this not working like Reservoir Dogs is that when you see Reservoir Dogs, that roundtable happens in the very beginning of the movie. You expect the movie to start out somewhat slow and build from there. The biggest problem is when it happens in Death Proof, it's not 40 minutes into the movie, it's 2 hours into the movie, being that it's the second of the double feature. Now, I will say the conversation wasn't nearly as funny, seeing a crusty old guy like Eddie Bunker talking about Madonna and Papa Don't Preach. That's some pretty good stuff. But after seeing it a second time, I did think it was pretty decent. So my revised conclusion is that Death Proof doesn't have nearly the pacing problem that I originally thought. I just think that by itself, Death Proof alone didn't have this problem. Now on to Kurt Russell's character Stuntman Mike. For my first viewing, I would have to say that I really didn't like seeing him cry like a baby. I originally didn't mind it at first, but I thought he should have snapped out of it and machoed up a bit. I felt like it was seeing Snake Plissken being pwned by the Spice Girls. It just kind of struck me wrong. For my first viewing, I will say I thought that maybe he wasn't the right guy for this role in this movie. He's a pretty popular guy, so if you're a fan of his, you find yourself rooting for him in a way. You're not rooting really for the bad guy, you just like him, not his character. One of the best lessons in typecasting I learned while watching an old interview with Michael J. Fox. This is right after he did Casualties of War. He, as always, pretty much plays the protagonist or good guy, and Sean Penn plays the heel along with 4 other actors. In the interview, they asked him if he'd play Sean Penn's character. He said, sure I would, but I just don't think anybody would want to see that. So even though he could and would play the bad guy, it just wouldn't be as believable. Sometimes typecasting can work in an actor's favor, and sometimes it doesn't. So when I first saw Kurt Russell, I just really couldn't see him in the bad guy role. He just doesn't usually fit that for me. I will say that in my second viewing, I went a little more with Kurt Russell being a bad guy. To give you an example of a classic bad guy, he wasn't even a murderer or anything, but he was that reporter from the movie Die Hard, Richard Thornburg, played by William Atherton.
Tell me you got that. All right.
No, it's...
Look, you let me in right now or I call the INS. Comprende? After this incredible ordeal, what are your feelings?
You just couldn't wait for this guy to get his ass kicked. I just couldn't see Kurt Russell as this kind of heel. There are many people that can play this role so well, and amazingly, for as many movies as Kurt Russell's done, this is fairly new territory for him. I will say that after seeing this movie by itself the second time, I enjoyed it much more than the first time. And I also want to make sure I give a shout out to Zoe Bell, because you're one crazy stunt woman. I can't believe the crap you guys pulled in this movie. I mean, it was flat out insane. I was on the edge of my seat more the second time than the first time. I know I didn't give you proper credit for your stunts in my first review, but she really needs to get her props whether you like the movie or not. She was awesome. For my overall rating, I give Death Proof 4.5 stars.